At the age of 6, a young boy travels through particularly dangerous trenches to deliver bullets to soldiers on the front line. He was on a mission under fire, and could have been killed if he hadn't been careful. His name is Sergei. A few days ago he was sleeping at home. His mother came into the room, picked him up and threw him out of the window. She told him to run, and not to look back. And then she was shot dead by the enemy. The whole village burned with the fire of war. Sergei was the only one who escaped. Sergei cried out for his mother as he fled into the forest.
Мама, где я? Где ты, мама? Мама!
He knew that from this moment on he would never have a mother again. The next morning Sergei was drinking water by the river when some German soldiers came to search the woods. He panicked and hid in a hole in a tree. He covered his mouth with his little hand, not daring to make a sound, even if a poisonous snake crawled past him. He held back his fear and didn't dare to move. He knew that the Germans in front of him were more dangerous than the snakes. Soon the 3 Germans had eaten their fill and left, but their leftovers were the only food Sergei had for days. After that Sergei wandered through the woods. When his shoes broke, he wrapped them in tree bark and kept walking. When he was hungry, he ate wild fruits from the trees, and when he was thirsty, he drank rainwater. When it was dark, he picked up branches and used them as weapons.
Не подходи! У меня ружье! Тебя не боюсь! Я тебя не боюсь!
But Sergei's little body couldn't hold out any longer. He lay weakly on the ground, and a hedgehog crawled up to him. Sergei said helplessly,
Чего смотришь, колючка наедая? Позбег, сказал наша.
and with that he passed out. Some time later a Soviet scout found him, and brought him back to the barracks. Everyone saw the wounded little man. They all gathered around. The commander, who was always serious, was amused by the little guy. When the commander asked for his name, Sergei stood up and shook his hand, and answered politely. But when he was asked about his mother and father, the strong little man burst into tears.
Тетка Анисия сказала, что мама...
Seeing this child who had lost everything before him, the soldiers were heartbroken, and they all held him tenderly in their arms to comfort him. The next day he was taken to the field hospital. The beautiful, gentle nurses took care of him. The officer came to visit him often. He gave Sergei a clip from his gun to play with. Sergei's presence brought joy to the hospital, which was full of sickness and pain. Soldiers often brought him gifts. Sergei became the darling of the group. He warmed the hearts of all those who had been battered by the war. The nurses begged the officer to keep the child in the barracks, but he was adamantly opposed, because children don't belong on the battlefield. The nurse was stunned.
Здесь никому не место.
A few days later Sergei recovered. He was to be sent to an orphanage. The officer was filled with sadness, but there was nothing he could do. He gave Sergei a small wooden gun. Sergei threw his arms around him.
Это
It was these 2 words that changed the officer's mind. He decided to keep Sergei and take him in as his adopted son. When he found out that Sergei had been retained, the soldiers were overjoyed. An old tailor worked through the night to make him a new uniform. In his uniform, a brave soldier was born.